Oke, sip, udah mulai record ya? Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon for my lecture, Mrs. Nani. Okay, today we are from Group 6. I would like to give a presentation from Group 6. And before we do a presentation, I would like to introduce my group, my personal group. And the first one, we have Gina Nuriana. Gina, you can introduce yourself.
Okay, my name is Gina Rasana.
Okay. The second is we have Tasya. Tasya, you can introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Tasya Putri.
Okay. And the third, we have Raisha. Yeah, Raisha, you can.
Hello, my name is Raisya Magpira.
Okay. And the last is me, Capil Rizky. So, for the presentation, we begin. Okay. For Raisa, please. Okay. The title from our group is a practice-based exploration of technology enhanced assessment for English language teaching. Okay. For the first reader, I would like to call Tasya for the first presentation. For Tasya, time and place.
Okay, JP, thank you. Introduction. In this material, take a practice-based look at how technology can be used in assessing English language teaching or ELT, a common thread running through this change in our starting proposition that over the last half century we have developed a greater understanding of how we might help someone to learn a language, and this change need to be reflected in the way we assess. Fundamentally, we hold the view that the ability to communicate and do things with language so lie at the heart of language learning. We need to develop certain skills in learners, and the skills we help to make our language learners better communicators and user of the language. It is therefore the skills that we need to focus on assessing. Some of the skills are global and associated with general performance in using and working with the language, and some of them are quite specific. They all need to be assessed if we are to effectively evaluate a student overall language ability. Next slide. However, not only has our understanding of what skills and knowledge we need to be effective language user change and enhance what we assess, but the way we assess has also changed. This is because our understanding of what assessment is and how to assess effectively has also developed. This changing in our understanding of the nature of assessment cover topics like who does the assessment, where it happens, who use the assessment, and when it happens, even the goals of assessment have changed. It isn't about simply evaluating a student's level. Assessment has a role to play in motivation, self self-reflection, and Westbeck, or we will talk more about the terminology in the next section. In fact, good assessment can even provide opportunities for learning. Next. Technology is another area that is having a direct impact on language assessment. Technology can offer affordance that provide new ways of assessing. We can now assess and evaluate students in ways that simply were not available to us even 10 years ago. We can video our students interacting in groups, or even working on a monologue or story. We can get we can get our students to record podcasts and audio files. We can get them to develop their written work in blogs and wikis. There is an abundance of tools that can be used in assessment, and thus broaden the type of assessment tasks we can create, as well as other quicker and easier ways to distribute them.
Okay, thank you, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Tasha, for the first speaker. Okay, next for the second speaker is Gina for time and place.
I will continue the material. So, assessment is very broad term that can cover formal exam and test, both external and internal, which are structured and built into the fabric of the academic years, as well as more informal types of assessment that teachers undertake as a part of their day-to-day practice. We recognize the test and exam set both internally and externally by organizations such as UCALES have changed in major ways over the past 50 years. However, most teachers have titles say in the exam offered by an institution. Science exams are generally set at an institutional level or run by external exam bodies. Our focus today is on the types of assessment that the teacher can set while teaching a course. These are often less formal and may not even be part of the official evaluation of a students, but because the teacher has control over this and has a much clearer idea of learn the learner's needs at any point in a course of study. It is our view that these tips types of assessment have an important impact on each student's learners. Okay, next slides. This will help point in much more real picture of what teachers are doing and perhaps provide encouragement to these teachers who are potentially reticent or worried about incorporating ICT into the assessment they do. Okay, the first assessment is still in this infancy, and it is almost always experimental. Okay, teacher often start with a tool that helps to broaden the skill base of their assessment. For example, they may introduce videoing of a fair work activity or getting the student to keep a blog. Often the motivation is to broaden they are assessing. The process tends to be developmental. Changing assessment products can be quite complex. So teacher might start by introducing a technology into their assessment to broaden the base. Then later, they might look at improving the evaluation criteria that goes with the assessment. And later still they might to add the feedback they are providing. So for example, they might start by getting their students to blog once on the field they have got the blog task right. They might start to look at the assessment criteria for the blog and perhaps the feedback they are providing. The focus in general done in stage with the focus shifting as the teachers get more confident. Okay, the first step are very important is with the use of ICT in the all domains. The initial for move into the area of ICT is crucial. Once teacher build the confidence, they tend to become more experimental and takes use of the greater number of tools. The hope that talk the snapshot of real life practice we can build towards a set of assessment design principle. We really hope that once you have read this chapter, you might have a clear understanding of why assessment is changing and some idea about how to introduce assessment that includes an ICT component. Okay. So the next slide, historical review of ELT assessment, a literature review of ELT publication, okay, over the past 50 years, reveal the shift away from a grammar focused traditional to real engagement with the language in real world setting became online until the 1970s. The general pedagogic for language teaching was based on learning lists of vocabulary, grammatical use, reading comprehension, and short story writing. Okay, the learning objectives of many courses centered on the mastery of language structures. The related texts were comprehension questions, which involved reading text and the production of short written answer. This assessed work tended to focus on the accuracy of the written answer in terms of their grammar, correct spelling, and syntax. There was often no requirement to show any real understanding of the text. Language was not really viewed from the perspective of communication or use, but rather on the learners exposed to mechanic of language. Language was learned about is with not necessarily used for anything. The modality of most assessment was written and tasked procedural knowledge taught to memorization of vocabulary list and certain types of sometimes obscure grammatical form. Okay, enough.
Okay. Thank you for Gina for this second speaker. Okay, we next for the third speaker. Right for Raisa. Lesson time.
In the 1960s, language teaching and assessment began to shift. This stage is often referred to in ELT assessment development as the communicative language teaching or CLT approach. This paradigm shift led to change in the skill we recognize as being important to learn a language and therefore in the skill we needed to assess and test. This shift has continued, and recent reviews of the changing approaches to language teaching have seen an increased acceptance of the key role of communication in learning a language. by Waters 2012. Before the shift to a more communicative approach to language learning, formal language exams had a very narrow focus. Reading assessment centered on comprehension, while writing was little more than the parroting of learned formulas. No attention was paid to learning sub skills like skimming and scanning, for example. The process of writing and organizing a text and planning it was almost ignored. The idea of portfolio assessment and doing draft and redraft was almost non existent. Most writing texts were assessed in a similar way to grammar. The assessment criterion was the correct use of the language rather than the appropriate application of content, meaning, and ideas. The interest was always on the product and not the process. Next is so the paradigm shift in teaching and learning a language led to a paradigm shift in what we assess to. By beginning of the 1970s, assessment had moved toward communication. We learn language so that we can communicate better with others. We stopped just focusing on grammar and developed a wider perspective that viewed language learning in terms of ability to communicate and use the language. The term communicative competence, our ability to communicate and put our ideas across either in the writing or spoken form, become important. New skills were recognized as central to our ability to communicate, include the organization and planning of text, pronunciation, the ability to paraphrase, the ability to turn text and engaging in a conversation. These new skills also needed to be assessed. The view that classroom knowledge is socially constructed rather than being merely transmitted from teacher to student has made a significant impact in English language teaching from Smith 2001. Social, social constructivism has an impact right across the sphere of education. It fits well with the idea that language is learned through communication and use of the language, rather than by simply learning about the language. Social contractivists see the individual as an active participant in their own learning, bringing to the table their prior knowledge and experience. Many studies have shown that students' abilities to understand something new depends on what they already know by Mays and de Freitas 2004. Through engaging and working with others, sharing ideas and collaborating, students learn. Of course, contractivists are not suggesting that we can learn from reading and listening. A type of dialogue takes place in our mind when we read or listen to something. But the emphasis does center around the social impact of learning. Of course, not all writers are totally convinced by the role of social contractivists.
Okay, thank you for Raisa for the third speaker. Okay, next for the last speaker is me. Okay, I next in all by the owner 2006, but it general acceptance even in more traditional learning context has certainly helped to promote and the role of communication in language teaching. Okay, there is no doubt that teaching and learning involve a much broader range of activity than in previous times. Teachers are expected to find ways to teaching all for skill. So assessing the learning that takes place has also become more complex. However, it shares our view that we have developed better understanding of the condition that can help students to learn language, and that we have also developed a better understanding of what effective and useful assessment in might include. Okay, next. Okay, a final point to make about new movement within education and within language teaching is that it's not always clear where their roots are. Ideas about the role of autonomous learning, for example, we highlight to communication language teaching as development within the field of language teaching is clearly specific to that field. However, we recognize that many of development in education were probably concurrently developing in the field of language education. Where the roots of the movement are is beyond the scope of this chapter. Uh, perha- perhaps one way of seeing for assessment has come is to look at the idea of language portfolio. Teachers often take a small initial step into the use in ICT in their assessment and slowly build on this. On this. At the other extreme, in purpose of the portfolio, where the student collects together a whole range a digital artifact together provide a comprehension assessment of student language ability. This might include video recording, audio recording, example mind maps, wiki entries, example of article read, online text, and etc. All assembled from the one central repository. Okay. I think enough for our presentation, and this time is Q&A time. I think for the Q&A time, we just in e-class, I think. The audience, you can ask to me in the e-class session for the Q&A time. Okay, I think for our group enough. I hope this is a best performance from our group, the group 6. Okay, I think enough for the presentation. iClass. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.